The closing bell has rung, but the business story continues. I'm Robert Tanya, watching Business Brief. Let's get started. Iran's foreign minister is in Russia as peace negotiations with the U.S. are stalled. The Bangko Sentral and the Anti-Money Laundering Council assert its revelations on the bank accounts of Vice President Sara Duterte and her husband, Manases Carpio, are above board. And the UK's King Charles will push through with his U.S. visit despite an assassination attempt on U.S. President Trump. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi is in Russia. He is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They are expected to discuss Tehran's war with Washington as well as bilateral ties. The official previously said he doubts the sincerity of U.S. President Donald Trump after he stopped U.S. negotiators from going to Pakistan. Trump had said Tehran can call Washington if it wants to resume negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blames militant group Hezbollah of undermining a ceasefire with Lebanon. The U.S.-mediated ceasefire has led to a significant reduction in hostilities, but Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah continue to clash in southern Lebanon.
Regarding Lebanon, there's an impression as if the IDF is not operating there. It is operating, and it is operating with force. It must be understood that Hezbollah's violations are effectively undermining the ceasefire. Therefore, from our perspective, what obligates us is the security of Israel, the security of our soldiers, and the security of our communities.
Global oil prices are rising again. As of 1:32 p.m. Manila time, both West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude climbed by nearly 2% per barrel. This follows stalled peace talks between the United States and Iran, prolonging disruptions in Middle East energy exports, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, a key global oil choke point. African ambassadors to China are expressing support for China's zero-tariff policy for dozens of African countries. This comes after Chinese President Xi Jinping announces zero-tariff treatment for all least developed countries with diplomatic relations with China.
China is the biggest market in the world, very lucrative market, very vibrant, and to be able to access that market, I think is going to be extremely important for our industrialization in Africa, for our modernization efforts, but also for us to improve efficiency and effectiveness in our business models and production systems.
Starting May 1 this year, zero-tariff treatment on products from 53 African countries take effect. This is expected to bring new development opportunities to the continent. Vice President Sara Duterte's husband is moving to sue top financial and lawmaking officials over alleged unauthorized disclosure of bank records. Lawyer Manases Carpio says he will file a criminal complaint today before the Quezon City Prosecutor's Office against officials from the Anti-Money Laundering Council, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and members of the House Justice Committee. He accuses them of violating the Anti-Money Laundering Act, Bank Secrecy Law, and Data Privacy Act by disclosing confidential financial information linked to him and his wife, Sara Duterte. The move comes amid ongoing impeachment proceedings where the AMLC reported billions of pesos in flagged transactions tied to their accounts. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Anti-Money Laundering Council assert they were carrying out their mandates in accordance with the law when they disclosed banking records of Vice President Sara Duterte and her husband Manases Carpio. The BSP clarifies Governor Eli Remolona has yet to receive a copy of the complaint, adding that he will respond at the proper forum when he does. Akbayan Representative Percy Sendanya slams Manases Carpio's complaint he just filed before the prosecutor's office. Carpio claimed that government agencies and some lawmakers, including Sendanya, disclosed confidential bank records during the House impeachment hearings. But speaking on BNC's The Spoke, Sendanya pushed back, maintaining that disclosures made in the course of impeachment proceedings are clearly exempt from bank secrecy rules.
At nabalita ko, named daw ako doon sa kaso na yan.
Talaga?
Oo.
As a member of the committee?
As the member of the House who moved for the issuance of the subpoena to the AMLAC.
Hindi ba may absolute privilege yung mga ginagawa sa House?
At saka sa dulo naman, napakalinaw, mas malinaw pa sa tanghaling tapat na talagang may exemption yung bank secrecy law when it comes to the impeachment. So, sayang ang oras at saka papel.
So why do you think they're raising all these points? Why are they filing these cases? Ano yung objective?
Wala ko sa tingin ko para mema na lang. Ano no? Mema. Mema sabi. Oo. Sayang sa oras, sayang sa papel, palibhasa maraming pera, maraming resources para mag-file ng kaso.
Senator Erwin Tulfo is urging fellow lawmakers to fast-track the revision of the oil deregulation law amid volatile fuel price increases. He says the government is limited by the law in managing prices and can only appeal to oil companies to moderate hikes. Tulfo has co-authored a Senate bill seeking to review the existing law and institutionalize transparency in the oil industry. The measure also requires oil companies to disclose unbundled pricing, including purchase costs, operating expenses, and profit margins. Aboitiz Equity Ventures is building a more diversified and resilient portfolio. This comes as it targets sustained value for shareholders over the long term. The Aboitiz Group says AEV continues to shift into an active portfolio manager from Union Bank's expansion in consumer banking to its growth in food and beverage and the integration of its real estate platform. The company adds it is becoming more focused, more agile, and better positioned for the future. Finance Secretary Frederick Goy expresses optimism that the Luzon Economic Corridor will boost investments across Luzon following talks with the U.S. ambassador. The talks focus on preparations for the 4th LEC Steering Committee meeting and the first Investors Forum. These will convene high-level delegations from the Philippines, the United States, and Japan. U.S. Ambassador Heather Variava reaffirms U.S. support for the corridor's success and stresses the importance of close coordination among partner countries. The LEC is a key development partnership linking major economic hubs in Luzon, including Clark, Manila, and Batangas, to attract high-quality investments. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. warns that triple global shocks are converging and affecting the agriculture sector. At a post-ministerial workshop, Chu Laurel cites climate change, saying repeated El Nino and La Nina cycles are reducing agricultural productivity. He also notes that the situation is worsened by animal diseases such as African swine fever and bird flu, which are affecting livestock supply and driving price pressures. Geopolitical tensions, including the Russia-Ukraine war, are also causing supply chain instability and export restrictions on key commodities. With these triple shocks, global food systems are being reshaped, straining government interventions and requiring more agile policy responses from governments. We'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. Foreign investment is softening, inflation is picking up again, and global tensions continue to ripple through the Philippine economy. The country remains investment grade, but with a more cautious outlook. So where does that leave business confidence, and what will it take to sustain growth in a more uncertain environment? We're joined by Chris Nelson, Executive Vice Chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, offering a front-row view of investor sentiment and business conditions. Good afternoon, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Robert, and many thanks to be here.
Chris, recent data shows a decline in foreign direct investment. How are investors currently viewing the Philippines as a destination for capital?
Well, yes, we've seen obviously there's been a downgrade from Fitch from stable to negative. And of course, challenges that the Philippines is facing is also being reflected across the world. The Middle East conflict has obviously increased the price of oil. There's inflation pressures in the Philippines, as in the UK. So I think it's obviously giving investors a cautious outlook in the short term. We, as the British Chamber of Commerce, along obviously with our colleagues at the Embassy and Business and Trade, will be stressing to companies the longer term and the potential of the Philippines. So yes, caution is there, but what we have to look at is the longer term and how we can move forward with positive developments.
Now, the government has also updated the foreign investment negative list. From your perspective, how meaningful is this in improving the country's competitiveness?
Well, we give all credit to President Marcos for updating that list. And as a British Chamber of Commerce, along with other business groups, we continue to advocate for further liberalization. And we appreciate what they've done to upgrade that. We would urge them to keep on, as did the American Chamber and also in our colleagues at the European Chamber, to further look at that list. The more that can be done, this gets more foreign investments. In that context, we would note that the UK is obviously looking at things like renewable energy, which I think you can do as a standalone. And we have continued interest in the Philippines in terms of obviously consumer goods, particularly food and other similar products. So yes, progress, but we want to see that continuing and further liberalization and business improvements and key legislation acts to be passed.
And in your engagements and discussions with British and other foreign firms, what factors are most influencing their investment decisions right now for the Philippines?
Well, I think, Robert, it really depends obviously on the business sector. For example, I had a recent meeting in London with the head of, this is actually with the Ambassador Locsin, this is also my wife and the Ambassador's wife, plus also the head of Philippine National Bank, which is also very active, that's Christine Vicentina. I also had a meeting with CyberQ head, that's Chris Woods. He's obviously interested in making sure that the Cybersecurity Act is passed. And this particular event you're showing now is on AI, which was one of our recent events. And that's obviously a key development. So I think it very much depends on the sector. So, for example, cybersecurity, we want to see that passed. We have lots of discussions, of course, with the Horticultural Trade Board and their particular interests. I saw an article you were just doing now with obviously Secretary Laurel and the challenges that they're facing in the agricultural sector. And in that context, we would warmly welcome, which is what President Marcos is looking at, is obviously reducing import duties. We have been one of the key suppliers of pork to the country, and we would strongly recommend that in order to stabilize supply. As your report said, the pig industry, for example, continues to be challenged by African swine fever, and therefore it's those areas. So I think our discussions very much depend on the sectors we're in. And of course, we continue to work with PEZA, the head of PEZA, which of course is Director General Panga, and getting British companies to invest and be based in the Philippines. So Philippine National Bank, CyberQ, and others are all interested in looking how they can develop business between the two countries.
Now, Chris, we know no country is shielded from the issues that's happening in the Middle East. In terms of imports and exports coming in from the UK going to the Philippines and from the Philippines to the UK, how much of that is affected by what's happening in the region?
Well, so far, I mean, we're pleased to say, and of course, we all want this conflict to be resolved because clearly the impact is on oil, which is about $100 a barrel. But if I look at, and I specifically come back to food imports were significantly stronger, I think up to about 50% in February. And British pork and the exporters of that we're not the leader in that, but we've grown significantly. So actually that's continuing, and the need for food security and obviously supply is very high for the Philippines. In that context, Robert, I'd also just mention the work done by our embassy in terms of chicken. Chicken now, I think, has got approval to come in on so it's a regionalized basis in case of bird flu. So all this is working together So we've still seen opportunities, and I would thank, obviously, the work of our exporters of British pork along with ourselves. So far, I think that's continuing. Obviously, the concern is obviously on new businesses, but I think we still have those opportunities. And as we've said, we've got to look long term. And if we can get key legislation passed, such as the Cybersecurity Act, Digital Payments Act, this will all assist in growing investment between the two countries.
Now, what is your peso outlook right now with what's happening, looking again at imports and exports between the two countries?
Well, regarding the peso, obviously it's weakened. I think it's now close to almost 82 to the pound. We did note, of course, that Bangko Sentral put up interest rates by 0.25%. The bank governor was very clear to say this was in response to seeing how inflation was. I think in the short term, the peso will be under pressure. The central bank has actually indicated they may, or at least that's what the analysts think, there could be another 50 basis point increase this year. I think we fully understand that the Bangko Sentral's key focus is inflation, and obviously the need to send a signal on that. I think there's opportunities. Again, I think it's tied back to the Middle East conflict. If we see a resolution there, and obviously the Straits of Hormuz reopens and the flow of oil resumes and other shipments, then I think the peso has an opportunity to strengthen. But certainly in the short term, it will be weaker around the 81.22 mark for the pound.
How much of an effect do you think the increase in the basis points by the BSP that just happened to 25 basis points, now it's at 4.5. How much effect is that on, let's say, the British companies that are operating here in the country?
I think initially that's not such a significant impact. I think it's more of a signal. Obviously, it had an impact on the stock market. The stock market today, I think, is down to about 5,900 points. I don't think that's, I think what it's showing is the central bank is acting quickly to show that they intend to try and do their best on inflation, which we clearly understand is driven by macro factors in this case. And of course, we bring it back to the point of Secretary Laurel and President Marcos. We've formally endorsed what they can do on import duties to reduce those, or on the minimum access volume plus to bring in more volumes. That will certainly help on food and food inflation. So I think the 0.25% is not going to deter or impact companies in the short term. What they're looking for is how can everybody weather this short term? What are the long-term developments? And of course, how will government spending and investments go going forward?
And now looking at the Fitch revised, they have revised the Philippines outlook to negative from stable, now while maintaining investment grade rating. Now, how is this being interpreted within the business community?
Well, I think they fully understand how Fitch has operated. I think the good part is that Fitch has maintained it as an investment grade. And if you look at the Fitch comments, they are specifically referring to the Middle East, the macroeconomic shock, of course, of inflation, the oil importation, that all obviously impacts on the Philippines. So I think keeping investment grade was very important. And I think also, coming back to the discussions we've been having on Bangko Sentral, I think it's important they did take that signal to put up a 0.25%, signaling on inflation. And again, we welcome the moves both of President Marcos and cabinet secretaries such as Laurel to look at imports. We would strongly urge that they do reduce those import duties. Let's allow the flow. So you keep basic commodities such as pork, rice, and of course, I think there's also corn been discussed at lower levels, therefore keeping inflation lower, which obviously gives more room for Bangko Sentral. And hopefully going forward, Fitch may then look at regrading once again we get over this Middle East conflict.
Now, what conditions or developments do investors typically watch when assessing whether risks are becoming more pronounced?
Well, of course, what they look at is how is the government responding in these. I think that, as we've discussed, Robert, I mean, there are challenges to the UK government and Europe as well
Yes.
from what's going on. I mean, it's not isolated to the Philippines. The Philippines is particularly affected because it imports nearly 100% of its fuel. I think what they're looking at is the government taking the right short-term decisions? What is it moving forward in terms of legislation and development? So revising the foreign negative investment list is a positive. We'd like to see it further liberalized. Number two, we want to see that legislation. Cybersecurity has moved forward. It's passed the House. It's now in the Senate. We would strongly urge that's passed this year. And we would also want to see the Digital Payments Act pass. All of this can make the Philippines an open area. What investors are looking at is they understand that governments, any government, will have short-term pressures. The question is, what is the long-term outlook? And are they taking decisions to make it a positive place to do business?
Now, looking at what the UK is doing during this crisis, what are the things do you think that the Philippines can extract from, let's say, best practices that's happening, the things that you're doing in the UK that can help us back here?
Well, I think all governments are acting the same way. For now, I think the Central Bank of England has held interest rates. I mean, obviously, they were looking at potentially reducing them. I think in the case of the UK, they're also looking at measures on terms of cost, right, to the consumer in terms of how this will go forward. Of course, excuse me, this depends on how much we have in terms of fiscal or monetary latitude, right? So I think those are the lessons to be had, right?
Now, looking at inflation, it has been, it's picked up again, largely driven by external factors such as the oil prices. Now, how are the businesses, the British companies operating here, adjusting to this environment?
Yeah, look, I think they're all trying to see how they can go forward. I think everybody's also being urged by the government to see how they can at least keep prices. I mean, again, we work closely with the Department of Trade and Investment, Secretary Roque, also Under Secretary Alan Gepti, and I know companies have been urged to see what they can do on price increases. I think everybody is trying to see how they can manage this in the near term, trying to keep, obviously, their prices for goods and services as stable as possible. What they're looking for is they want to keep that demand up. In some cases, obviously, they may be forced to pass on. But I think in general, everybody's looking to see how they can manage their way forward at the same rate, if possible.
Now, in your opinion, to what extent can monetary policy address the current drivers of inflation, particularly those coming from global supply shocks?
Well, it's very difficult. And, you know, I fully appreciate and empathize with the Central Bank of the Philippines and along with the Bank of England. Monetary policy can only do so many things. I think the central bank governor has been very clear with that. I think what it does do is send a signal that inflation is important. The Philippines, in all credit to the central bank and the Department of Finance, had got inflation down to a low level, I think a 9-year low before. So clearly those policies had worked. And now they have to see how they can get themselves through this very short-term challenge, hopefully short-term challenge. So I think what it does say is that, look, they don't want, obviously, inflation over 4%. Their target is between 2 to 4%. They've achieved that. Food and stable food is clearly the key because that affects the mass of the population. And, of course, any time that oil goes back, then we are looking to see, obviously, a rollback in diesel and, obviously, gas prices. And, of course, they're looking at long-term supply. I mean, I've been looking at, you know, there's a possibility of bringing in sustainable aviation fuel. So I think this will drive longer-term developments. But for now, the government has to look at short-term to assuage inflation, particularly affecting the consumer.
Now, you've mentioned sustainable aviation fuel. There's a growing discussion around opportunities in this. Now, how significant are these emerging sectors in shaping investor interest today?
Well, I think going forward, I think it's obviously, it's definitely a yes. I mean, look, the Philippines already had a strong push for renewable energy and a desire to be very heavily focus towards renewable energy. And as mentioned, the UK has one of the largest investments there through Actis, the fund. In that context, we're planning to run, I think it'll be now in June, an event on EVs, electrical vehicles. And that's actually seen a growth. In some countries across the world, that's a very high level. I think Norway now is up to, I think, almost over 90%, I think I read somewhere. So I think there's going to be a push in those areas. We've already seen solar energy, wind, thermal in the Philippines, and this will be driven even further. So I think those areas will develop even after this, because what people are going to look at is, the sustainability of supply, and of course linked to that pricing. So it's definitely going to be a push for renewable energy, and linked to that, obviously, electrical cars, which we've seen in various other countries.
Now, as everyone now looks into alternatives like what you've mentioned, EVs, renewable energy, sustainable aviation fuel, how fast do you think the growth in this sector would be right now, in terms of how fast can we move to change from the reliance on oil and gas into the transition into EV, renewable energy, and as such?
Well, let me take the two parts. So I think in terms of renewable energy, I think that's already on its way. And we've seen, obviously, local players, along with, obviously, UK investors, as we've discussed. And I think renewable energy will continue to grow. The Philippines already had a target, I believe, to be over 50%. And this will give them a further focus going forward, because clearly power and energy needs to do that. We know that the main grid has been supplied by coal, but I think going forward, renewable energy, certainly supplying the main part of the grid, will develop strongly. And there are investors, and the UK is particularly interested in that. As part of our, by the way, our joint economic committee. In terms of electrical vehicles, there is a growth of that. You see more of those in the Philippines. However, of course, you need to develop charging stations, and look at maybe further incentives. I mean, I raised the question of Norway. Norway, as you know, is an oil producer, but I think through a lot of incentives, it's got the vast majority now of car ownership is electrical vehicles. So, in short, sorry, Robert, renewable energies will develop, I think, very strongly as they have been. Electrical vehicles were slower, but I think the key there is going to be charging stations.
Now, currently, UK companies operating here in the Philippines, how many of them are into renewable energy, EVs, or are there discussions right now for more companies maybe to look at the Philippines as a hub, as a part of the supply chain of technology, renewables, and manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in terms of one of our members is Jaguar Land Rover, represented by Inchcape. He's actually on our board, Chris Ward. So they obviously bring in electrical vehicles, as do a lot of companies. In terms of renewable energy, there's definitely a key focus there. As I mentioned, so one of the things that's been set up to increase trade and investment between the two countries was a joint economic committee. The first meeting was last year, which was actually attended by Undersecretary Alan Gepti on behalf of the Philippines. And this year it'll be in the Philippines, I understand, because the Philippines is chair of ASEAN. And we know that infrastructure, and in particular renewable energy, is key to that. So it's in the interest of both companies. And I think the UK companies will particularly look at that. And as we say, to use an old adage, don't let a crisis go to waste. I mean, this is also a great opportunity to develop new businesses as we all try to get and circumvent through the challenges that the Middle East conflict is presenting.
Now, as we look at the crisis that we're experiencing right now, what kind of other opportunities are UK businesses looking inward towards here, the Philippines, that could actually be potential opportunities to work together?
Well, look, I think the Philippines, as we've stressed constantly to UK companies, is a gateway to Southeast Asia. In that context, it's also important that the Philippines is in the regional comprehensive trading bloc, which we were strong supporters of. We also know that the Philippines wants to join CPTPP, which the UK is already a member of, and we hope that application will progress quickly and smoothly, because that then adds into further trading blocks. And finally, of course, let's not forget, and I know this is slightly overshadowed, but the Philippines is now chair of ASEAN. This is a great opportunity. We know some of those initial meetings will go online, but still it can bring a lot of business here in focus. And in that context, we'd like to support all the work of Joey Concepcion, who's working on the business side back, along with obviously George Barcelona, Michael Tan, and of course, Executive Director Patrick Chua, who was with me attending a UK ASEAN forum on the 17th of March in London. So
now, what are your expectations?
Let's not forget that.
What are your expectations with the event coming up, although scaled down?
Well, I still think there's a great opportunity. I think what we've got to look at from ASEAN is how can the Philippines still, despite these challenges, actually get development. And I think it will bring ASEAN closer together. I think it reinforces to people some of the concerns you have, which is why we've been discussing renewable energy, the fact that your reliance is in one area. And of course, the focus which Joey Concepcion certainly raised during his talk online at the UK ASEAN Forum was we should also be focusing on SMEs and how ASEAN and the chair of ASEAN can benefit the overall mass of the population.
And finally, Chris, looking ahead, what key signals or policy directions would strengthen investor confidence in the Philippine economy?
Well, I think short-term actions we strongly urge, which obviously has been talked by Secretary Laurel, by President Marcos, is reduce import duties for food, particularly obviously the areas we're looking at, which is pork. Obviously, that will help staple goods. We would strongly urge the passage of key legislation. We're pleased to see Cybersecurity Act has passed the lower house. It's now in the Senate. As we said, we have two key members on cybersecurity, CyberQ and NCC. Both of them can support these moves forward and look forward to further liberalization. This is the time to say to companies, yes, we have challenges. We'll further liberalize the economy and therefore come and do business and that will be a benefit to the Philippines, and you'll get a gateway to Southeast Asia.
Okay, on that note, Chris, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Always great to hear that UK-Philippine relationship continues to strengthen. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and have a good afternoon to you and all your viewers.
Okay, you too. Okay, we'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. The Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Department reports very unhealthy to emergency levels of air quality in Manila and Makati. Manila City's Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Department reports a steep decline in air quality as the Navotas landfill fire continues. The Manila Public Information Office urges vulnerable groups, particularly children, senior citizens, pregnant women, and those with respiratory illnesses, to remain indoors if possible. Meanwhile, in Makati, air quality reached unhealthy to emergency levels across the board at 10 p.m. on April 26. But the latest update from the Makati DRRM office this morning shows that air quality has mostly stabilized. Senator J.V. Ejercito calls for a Senate investigation into the raid conducted by the National Bureau of Investigation on a KTV bar and hotel linked to the Defensor family in Pasig City. Ejercito, who chairs the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, noted the Ombudsman himself questioned the NBI's handling of the operation and the alleged exclusion of some individuals in the charges. Initial reports say 26 individuals were charged in connection with qualified trafficking and alleged violation of the Dangerous Drugs Act. Ejercito says conflicting accounts, including video footage, make it imperative for the Senate to establish who was present during the raid and how they were assessed. An apparent assassination attempt against President Donald Trump sent the White House into crisis mode. A Filipino journalist witnessed the chaos and shares what she saw in the report by U.S. correspondent Henny Espinosa.
Another close call for President Donald Trump. On Saturday night, during the White House Correspondents' Dinner at a Washington, D.C. Hilton, President Trump was preparing to speak when several gunshots rang out outside the venue. Vice President J.D. Vance, First Lady Melania Trump, and cabinet members were also in attendance. Secret Service agents quickly rushed the president and other top officials to safety. Inside, many of the 2,600 guests took cover. Journalists who were at the event recounted the moment they first heard the gunshots. Among them, Filipina Janelle Dumalaon. Dumalaon, an Ateneo de Manila University graduate and a correspondent for Deutsche Welle, said she sheltered in a bathroom after hearing the shots.
I was in the bathroom when I heard 6 or 7 shots ring. I'm not sure exactly. And what was going through my head was that I thought those were gunshots, but I could not be certain. And when a woman from the security services, either from the hotel or law enforcement, not sure exactly, she confirmed that those were gunshots and that we should shelter in place.
Authorities say the armed suspect fired at a Secret Service agent who was wearing a bulletproof vest and is recovering. The suspect was taken into custody and reportedly had multiple weapons. On Truth Social, Trump shared a video of the suspect rushing security at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, as well as a photo of the suspect on the ground after being apprehended. Media reports identified the lone shooter as 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen of Torrance, California, a teacher who was once named Teacher of the Month in Los Angeles County.
Right now, the defendant is being charged with 2 counts, 924C, using a firearm during a crime of violence, and a second crime under 111, which is assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon.
Trump, who has faced multiple assassination threats over the years, said the venue was not sufficiently secure. He then argued the incident underscored the need to complete his proposed $400 million White House ballroom project.
And I didn't want to say this, but this is why we have to have all of the attributes of what we're planning at the White House. It's actually a larger room, and it's much more secure. It's drone-proof, it's bulletproof glass. We need the ballroom.
Phil Trump supporter and Republican leader Rachel Gunther posted online blaming opponents of the project and arguing the incident proves the ballroom needs to be built. Donnie De Leon, a Phil Democratic leader, said he was troubled by what he called an attempt to turn a grave security incident into a pitch for a construction project. He said, quote, "It isn't leadership, it's opportunism, and as a veteran, he finds it deeply offensive." The president said the Correspondents' Dinner would be rescheduled within 30 days. Henny Espinosa, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
We'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. U.S. President Donald Trump says that the suspect in the shooting at Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington is a sick guy full of hatred for Christians. In an interview with Fox News, Trump said the suspect's own relatives have flagged him to law enforcement. Federal agents arrested Cole Thomas Allen at the Hilton Hotel. He ran through security checkpoints and fired shots.
And the guy is a sick guy. When you read his manifesto,
He hates Christians. That's one thing for sure. He hates Christians, a hatred. And I think his sister or his brother actually was complaining about it. You know, they were even complaining to law enforcement. So he was a very troubled guy.
Despite the White House shooting incident, King Charles' state visit to the United States is pushing through. Buckingham Palace confirmed this after discussions with U.S. officials. U.S. authorities said the shooting was likely aimed at the president and officials, with President Trump noting there was no indication of additional threats. King Charles' visit will include a private meeting with Trump and a congressional address. Pangasinan 2nd District Representative Marco Juanco asserts shifting to nuclear power can eliminate the country's dependency on crude oil. The Middle East crisis has triggered fuel supply concerns and price spikes in the country. Speaking to BNC's At the Forefront, Cojuangco said reviving the Bataan nuclear power plant can also remove our need for coal.
What you have in the Strait of Hormuz are thousands of ships bringing bulky fossil fuels to their destinations. In the case of nuclear, you would replace 50 ships of 50,000 tons each with one jeepney. In the case of the Philippines, we have a unique context because we are fossil fuel poor. We don't have coal here in the Philippines. We import it from Indonesia. And if there were trouble in the West Philippine Sea with the designs of China on our territory, then if we avoid all of those ships delivering coal to the Philippines, we sidestep the issue altogether.
The lawmaker appeals to President Bongbong Marcos to finish what his father, Ferdinand Marcos Sr., started.
Mr. President, the entire world is going nuclear. Many countries in Europe, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, the Netherlands, the UK, Italy, Poland are going nuclear. The United States has declared they need to quadruple nuclear by 2050. Let us not lose this chance. Your father built this in response to the 1973 OPEC oil crisis. Now we have a new energy crisis caused by the war in Iran. It is timely to once and for all get this done.
We're seeing mixed movements in fuel prices this week after 2 consecutive big-time rollbacks. Prices of diesel are expected to drop by 8 to 10 pesos tomorrow. Gasoline could see an increase by up to 1 peso and 50 centavos. That's based on 4-day trading data from the Mean of Platts Singapore, the benchmark pricing reference of local oil companies. Currently, diesel is priced at an average of 105 pesos per liter and gasoline at 85 pesos. We'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. Asian shares are mixed as Iran talks remain uncertain. Among Asian markets, the Kospi posted the biggest gain, up more than 2%. Meanwhile, the Straits Times Index declined the most, down about 0.6%. In currency trading, the U.S. dollar traded mixed against major Asian currencies. In commodities, gold was lower while oil prices were higher. In cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin was down nearly 0.7%, while Ethereum fell almost 2%. Philippine shares end in the negative territory. The PSCI closes 0.7% lower to 59.01. The sectoral indices are mixed, with holding firms falling the most at almost 2%. Mining and oil rises the most at nearly 2%. Decliners outpace advancers 107 to 86, with value turnover at 5.4 billion pesos. The day's most active stocks are mixed, with Dito falling the most at 4%. Nickel Asia rises the most at nearly 5%. And in currencies, the peso closes at 60.71 against the US dollar from the previous close of 60.70. Net income of Union Bank of the Philippines more than doubled in the first quarter to 3.8 billion pesos. This was driven by strong loan expansion and steady recurring revenues. However, results were weighed down by trading losses linked to market volatility stemming from the Iran conflict. The company said it is carrying strong momentum, building on actions taken last year to strengthen its balance sheet and lay the foundation for sustainable growth. Philippine National Bank posts a net income of over 6 billion pesos in the first quarter, up by 5% year-on-year. This was driven by double-digit loan growth and higher interest income despite a volatile rate environment. The company said its return on assets remains strong at nearly 2% for the quarter. It added that this reflects efficient asset deployment and benefits of a balanced loan mix, which continues to support consistent earnings despite an uncertain rate outlook. Luxury developer Shank Properties posts a near 60% drop in net income to 4 billion pesos in 2025. This followed a sharp decline in condominium sales. Lower valuation gains from investment properties also weighed on the bottom line. FIFA is set to increase the prize money for the 2026 World Cup, which will feature 48 teams. According to soccer's world governing body, the increase still requires approval from the FIFA Council meeting ahead of the 76th FIFA Congress in Vancouver. In December, FIFA said prize money for this year's World Cup would be 50% higher than the previous edition at $655 million after agreeing to a record $727 million financial contribution to the tournament. FIFA also told Reuters that the prize pool is expected to increase further as the organization projects more than $11 billion in revenue for the 2023 to 2026 cycle. And that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Robert Tan. Join us again tomorrow for the stories that help you plan your next big, bold business moves. Only here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.